Cortés, Brooklyn-based filmmaker and photographer, and I had the good fortune of being nominated to the Abbey Road Music Photography Awards. Discovering music is being one of the things that drives one of my passions. I don't take photos for the sake of photos. It's fun. I really love the photography as an art form, but I think I love music even more. So to me, the sense of discovery is what really attracts me to the underground scenes and to the underground music photography. To me, it is critical to capture a band, and actually at the beginning of their journey, it is cool to take those big photos of, I don't know, Idols or Metallica where they're playing in front of 100,000 people. But imagine if you're the person who shot Metallica in 1981 when they're playing with Dave Mustaine in a kind of venue without lights in San Francisco or LA. I think those photos are more interesting and they have a historic value. And it doesn't matter if you take them with a Polaroid, with a point and shoot, or with the latest Canon or Sony. I feel to capture those memories and those instants in time, I think is more important. Capturing those shots when a band is up and coming and you're the only one that knows them because they might be your friends or the friends of your friends, or you were introduced because you were the only person at the show. I think that is interesting because also you as a photographer, you don't have any pretensions. You're just hanging out. You're having a good time with these people. You're sharing, usually you're talking about music or life or whatever worries or politics. And that's the reason those photos of artists at the beginning of hip hop or the beginning of every scene, artists usually they have their guards down. They don't have their photography face. They're just there hanging. And if you're the person that is there, as a photographer, you also don't have your photographer hat. You're just there as well. You don't have any pretensions. You're not thinking, oh, I took this photo and this guy is going to be super famous in 20 years. No, you're just there, you just happen to have a camera. And maybe the photo was in focus. Or maybe it's out of focus, and that's going to be part of it. But that's, I think, to me, is more important and more interesting. And I'm really passionate about that and about discovering and discovering because I always want to listen to new music. Every time I start my day, it's like, what are we going to listen today? It's going to be, I don't know, a Def Heaven day, a Slayer day, a Miles Davis day, or some crazy electronic band, whatever. So that, to me, is the most interesting part about music photography. There's historical value in terms of the New York underground scene. I feel there've been many waves here in New York. New York is a city that influences many other cities in the US and the world, especially if you go back in history. You have in the 50s, the jazz movement was very important here. Then if you move to the 70s, you have the punk movement here with the Ramones and at the CBGBs and all those bands in the 70s. Then you go to the post-punk era with the no wave movement, and then you have Swans, Sonic Youth, and then go to the early 2000s and you have Yeahs and Interpol. So that's the reason I think if you go back in history, there's always interesting waves of musicians that for some reason, I don't think anyone plans it, but for some reason they carve some questions to the public and into a popular culture, and they can tell a different story. And why New York? I feel because New York is a city that is very multicultural. It's a city where I'm not from New York. I was born in Colombia and I came here 20-something years ago. And most of the people that live here come from other places and they just want to tell the story here. So maybe because New York is a melting pot of cultures, that's the reason the underground scenes there's always something different to tell. And it's a very liberal city as well. So you have all those elements, the politics of the world, the politics of the country, and how that affects the people in our city. And if you go back in time, there's always been something happening politically. If you go back to the 80s, if you go back to the 50s, if you go to early 2000s, there's always something politically or in the geopolitical world that was happening that affect the art world. So long story short, the reason why New York underground scene still kind of coming up every time reinvents itself, it's because New York is a melting pot of cultures, and the underground scene is a representation of that. I feel that is something very interesting is, especially in the underground scene nowadays, I don't think it's a underground scene that represents only electronic music or only punk music or only metal music. I feel there's bands and artists that represents all those styles in a very strong way. They're kind of, in a way, trying to make a mark with their music. And that, to me, I think is what it's interesting about the underground scene in New York. Yeah, also another city that has a great underground scene, I feel, is LA, but it's very different. LA is a city where everybody moves in a car. The distances are very, everything is far away. The other thing that in New York makes it very interesting, also the hip hop is obviously originated here in New York. So because it is a city that is communicated by the subway system, and everything, if you look at it from a bird's eye perspective, everything is very close. You have Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan. You can walk from one place to another technically. You know, it will take you a few hours, but you can still walk from one part of Manhattan to the other part. So the fact that things are close to each other, I think that is also make the art scenes more influential. I think right now Bushwick is very important, but you have so many artists, musicians, filmmakers, painters, sculptors, all working in the same area. So that also, I feel that the scenes are not only music. If you go back to the, for example, the no wave scene in New York, or the punk scene, how many artists you have in the punk scene, and then you have Andy Warhol, and you have Kate Haring, and you have all those artists making things. Same thing in London. London, the underground scene in London is insane, but I feel that London is also a melting pot of cultures. That's a really good question. Price. The reason we're here at my studio is in Industry City, which is an area in Sunset Park. It is a very odd area because we are next to a river. This used to be the port in New York City back in the day, 100 years ago. So all the grains, used to be storage for grains, basically. That's why you have those rail systems. These used to be, we have the big windows because you have a rail system there. This used to be full of grains, and the train continues. This is just storage, basically, because it's next to a river. So then it was abandoned for so many years, and then I guess someone bought it, like, I don't know, 30 years ago, and they started to try to make an experiment with this area, which I think is cool, which is they started to kind of try to bring artists to offer this studio. So this floor is full of photographers, painters, filmmakers. So and they kind of want to bring those voices. They do open studios event. They just did it a couple of weeks ago, and what brought me here is they're offering it could be far for some people, but they give you a very good price for your money as well, and you're also, I think most importantly, they give you a community. I think something that I really enjoy of working at Industry City is if I go to the bathroom that I have to walk through the corridor for like a minute, if I run into someone, my friend there across the door is a painter, and when we just start to talk about the situation that is happening at the Met or whatever, or complaining about something random, but our conversations are always very enlightening. So, and we, at the end of the day, we hang out here, we drink a couple of beers and share our work and things. So it's inspiring as well. I used to have a studio in Manhattan, which was not a studio, it's a small working space. I paid literally the same money. I only could fit that couch. I remember the size because the size of the couch in a table, that was it. And I used to pay the same amount of money for couch and table. But the point is, my neighbors were just accountants and psychologists, and it was just a random building. It was nicely located, but it was not but this building or this area I feel that there's production companies, you get people to kind of feed your work as well. So I think that is important, to build a community. I do think underground spaces and DIY spaces for me, are the fuel of the type of work that I'm doing. To be honest, I prefer to be in a place that I have no idea what I'm going to do. There's obviously no proper lighting, there's no proper anything, but the fact that it's unexpected, I think that keeps me on my toes, and I'm always going there for the music. I'm usually taking photos of bands that I like and I'm listening to. So I'm going there to see what they're doing, but usually it's under a bridge or over a bridge. They did not too long ago a show, and it was in the Williamsburg Bridge. Literally, they posted on Instagram an hour before the show is gonna be on top in the middle of the bridge. Go there before the police shows up. 3 punk bands played 15 minutes set each, and we all went, and then we all left, and the police didn't arrive in that one. But there's a lot of shows like that in abandoned spaces. To me, the music that is playing there is very raw, is very real. No one is pretending to be anything. I feel that the audience and the band are just one. There's no separation of, oh, we're the band, we're here on stage, and you're the audience, and you're paying a fee to see me. I feel it's just a party. We're just having a good time together. And that aspect, I feel that is very fascinating to me, that we all go to this random place, that there's no pretensions, any pretensions of, oh, you're the audience, I'm the artist. No, we're just there to, oh, these are our new songs, and let's have a good time, and someone brings drinks, and that's it. And show ends, and that's the story. And I think that to me is more fascinating to capture as a filmmaker or photographer, because you get a lot of, especially in the photography side, you get a lot of unexpected moments that you cannot plan. They're not part of a set. Oh, we have the encore and 10 songs. No, it's just gonna happen. And to be able to capture those moments, to me, is very unique, and it's a privilege. And it's a privilege that I've been able to see many of those. I moved to New York in 1998 in a very weird moment in time for the city and for myself as well. I moved from Colombia, which was at the time a country in the middle of a civil war, I would say, between the guerrillas and the government. You have the cartels. It was crazy. So for me, I just want to explore a new life in this city. When I moved here, I didn't speak the language, so I was not connected to the underground scene, because there was no internet. Was not obviously we had internet, but it was not like now that you have internet. You have all this information at your fingertips. You had to go and get the Village Voice and look for the shows, or the Aquarian, or whatever. And obviously the DIY shows that were not featured there in the newspaper. So, but the New York underground scene has evolved and changed, to me, especially in the past few years, drastically. Before, I remember the scenes being very divided. And the reason I feel that they were divided is I do like a lot of styles of music. I could like industrial music, or goth, or indie and punk, and I do have bands that I love that are metal bands or death metal bands. And I remember going to a goth show or to an indie band, and you had to wear like a different uniform. This is my indie uniform. This is my goth uniform. This is my. So I'm going to a metal show. Okay, now I'm gonna wear the Napalm Death hat. So it is a different. You were part of a different subculture, a different tribe. Something that I feel is happening in New York City, especially in the past 10 years, is the scenes are, those lines that were dividing the subgenres are completely blurred. And I feel that nowadays, if you look at it, there's bands from that in the same bill you can have an electronic noise artist opening and an indie band closing. That was unheard of 20 years ago. So, and to me that's fascinating to see how those lines are blurred and people are open to more styles of music, and people is more open. I remember back in the day, if you're into metal and someone shows up with a goth set or something more mellow, the metalheads will be like, no, it's not metal enough. Even me, when I was 13, there were certain bands I didn't like because they had keyboards. Can you imagine? So because they were not metal enough. So, but obviously, then you discover other things, and you discover Godflesh and all the bands that open your mind. So, long story short, what I think is interesting right now is, in terms of music, lines are blurring. So anything is possible. And that palette makes the underground scene more interesting here, I feel. And when you go to a show, you don't have any idea what to expect. And there's 4 different artists that can be completely different. And the audience takes that information in a very cool way as well. They're open to those different styles. And to me, that is a big change. That younger audiences are way more open than my generation, for example. My generation, we were very close. We were like, I'm into metal, I'm just gonna listen to metal, and that's pretty much it. And if a metal band makes a mellow album, I don't like them anymore. And I think that's wrong. I think we all, as humans, change and evolve, and we can be open to read different books, listen to many albums. And I feel nowadays the underground scene is a representation of that as well. Also, the politics of the country affect what the underground scene is happening. So that I think is an opposition to the current government, to the madness that is happening in the world. That is, I feel, is uniting the scene right now. And that is something that the reason I feel all those bands that might be very different and playing the same venues, are playing the same shows, and because there's a sense of unity. Why I feel that while America is divided, the local scene is very, very united and very strong. Wow, that's a great question. I have no idea. I don't, the question being, what is my process when I go to a show and take photos? I don't think I have a defined process, to be honest, because I feel the type of shows that I like to go, they're all a little bit different. Something that I like to keep my gear to a minimum so it doesn't get in the way. I like to make sure, for me it's important to try to capture an image that tells a story. And the storytelling aspect of photography to me is the most important one. So being able to capture something that I will remember as a viewer, oh, that happened that day in this way, shape or form. So I would say my process is to listen to the music and be present. And don't never forget that you're there in a show. It's not your photo shoot, it's a show. And you're there just as someone who's documenting as part of history, and you're there also as someone who needs to go there and enjoy the music and have a good time. I always go to shows and my process is to listen to the music and have a good time and enjoy and be present at the moment. Then I happen to have a camera and take some photos. But most importantly is to go to a show because I love the music and I want to see that band and I want to see what they're doing. Or I'm curious because someone recommended to me or discovered them on Instagram or Spotify or so on. So my process is just to listen to the music. The photography to me is an afterthought, even though it's very important to me. Obviously, I'm a photographer, but it's not my approach, and it's never been my approach. I started first going to shows and I always had a camera with me, but it was not, oh, I have a camera now I'm gonna go to shows. It was never that way around. I was just going to shows and then my camera started to, first it was a point and shoot, and then I was able to afford something a little bit better, and then, oh, I can take photos and they can look better, and then you learn, but it was first music. So, and I'm not saying that there's no good or right or wrong approach. I'm just saying that's never my approach. It's not going. it's not, I'm not going for the photos, I'm going for the music. And sometimes the photos are great and sometimes they suck and it's fine as well. It's okay. It's not a competition of the best photo. We're at the service of the music at the end of the day. Pictures of gigs that I feel that were memorable and I wish people were there to see it. I feel one that comes to mind is horror at Aviv. Aviv was a DIY venue in the middle of Bushwick maybe 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. That was the last show at Aviv. And Horror, which is a band that now is gigantic and they are on the covers of so many magazines, that was a show that I feel was so crazy and epic. Obviously, they were not a famous band at the time. There were no more. I was 50 people at the show, something like that. Yeah, there was no space for more people. It's not, and they're like a crazy punk electronic band from Newark, New Jersey, and they were doing that show at Aviv. I think that was a really memorable show. Another show, any show at San Vitus, I think was so unique, a now defunct venue in Brooklyn. Sun at San Vitus, I think, was insane because if you're familiar with shows by the band Sun, they usually have like a wall of amps and it's all about these like heavy drone riffs that are go like forever, super heavy, and they always play in large venues because of that. It's very ceremonial, very deep, very dark. And playing in a 200 venue cap, it was insane because I remember getting into San Vitus, it was just amps. And then they started the venue, it was like crumbling. That show was something else. Anthrax at San Vitus as well. I don't know if it was a secret show or not, but again, Anthrax, huge band playing San Vitus was insane. To this day, I remember the moment where they played Caught in a Mosh, the famous song, and it was like, I didn't think it was gonna survive that day. But imagine that mosh pit in a like tiny venue, Anthrax, like with all their power, and Charlie Hernandez with like his like big drum set with like 2 kick drums and everything, but still in the tiny venue. So and I love that part because they didn't reduce their things; they still are big band playing in smaller venues. But also the early shows of Bambara. Bambara is a local band that I really love. And I feel that I've seen their career from those early shows at maybe at Bayville's or, no, I'm sorry, early shows at Union Pool or smaller venues where like they're like 20 people just there, like the usual drunk guy not paying attention. And I've seen that band now playing in front of 100,000 people opening for Foo Fighters. So going back to those early shows of Bambara, I thought, and now they're touring actually the UK, a lot of sold out shows. But those early shows, I feel they were very unique because, and I go back to those photos and the shows are exactly the same. They just pour their whole heart to in every single show. And the same energy. It doesn't matter if they're playing in front of 100,000 or in front of 20 people that might not paying full attention because they're not a famous band yet. So there's so many, but I feel Horror, Sun, Anthrax, those are kind of big ones, yeah. I think the intimate shows are the ones that stand out, and some of shows that I didn't capture, that I was not taking photography at the time, but I remember seeing Fantomas at Knitting Factory. Fantomas with Mike Patton, obviously from Fate No More, Dave Lombardo from Slayer, King Bozo from Melvins, and what's his name, the bass player from Mr. Bungle, playing in a very tiny venue back in early 2000, like 2002 or 1, something like that. Same, it was not so crowded. It was full, but seeing those musicians of that caliber playing those small venues, it was so unique, so unique. So, yeah, those shows. I wish I had a camera at the time. I had the memories, which is the worst thing. Right now, I've been over the past few years, 4 years or so, I've been working on a feature documentary film that is, the idea is to document this new wave of or this current wave of the underground scene in Brooklyn. And to me, it's a piece that is a parallel to me, it's a piece that is a parallel to what's happening in the political side of the United States and how the scene is evolving and currently evolving and changing in parallel to the political climate of the US. It is a story of some bands of that scene which represent, not all of them, of course, there's so many and so many artists, but it's to me, it's a story of how scenes are created or how new scenes emerge and the reasons why and what elements could be geopolitical or the art movement or whatever is happening as outside influence, it creates a new scene. To me, the reason I started to create that film is I was already attending those shows, and I felt that there were new voices, and shows were getting bigger, and a lot of people was, instead of like 20 people, they were selling out, and that was the constant, and all the local bands were starting to sell out shows in smaller venues and then bigger venues, and I felt that, to me, it felt that a new generation of bands was starting, and new voices, with a completely different story of the previous generation, which is, especially Brooklyn, you have, with the closing of Death by Audio, which was a very important venue, I would say 12, 15 years ago. Then there's a new generation of musicians that they didn't get to play Death by Audio, but they heard those stories. And they have these new venues like the Globe, for example, or Globe, where all those kind of new shows started to happen. And that was what attracted me to document the story, because I felt that it was something that is brewing in New York. And if you go back in history, it's always something gonna happen in New York. And New York is about change and how we all embrace change. So I felt that scene was representing that change, especially that change in the political landscape. So parallel to the political landscape, I wanted to document what was happening in that underground scene locally. I didn't intend to do the film at the beginning. I was just a part of the story in a way that I was just going to the shows. And then I was like, oh, but this could be a film. So we've been in production for 4 years. There was a pause. I had a baby and all that good stuff. But we're deep into post-production and doing some pickup shots as well. So hopefully wrapping up that project soon. I feel it's important for the film to tell the story how a movement starts, how a new scene is born. What are the elements that create a new scene? What are the political elements that create a new scene? I think it's funny when I see people, when a musician posts, a famous musician posts something about politics, and people said you should keep yourself with music, or you should kind of stay in your lane. And I strongly disagree with that, because music is political. Every art is political. If art is not political, I feel that it needs to tell a story. If art is not political, it's not telling a story, it might be decoration. And I think, or at least for me, I think as musicians, as we document musicians, at this moment in time, I think it's critical to tell their story and how the political landscape is affecting their lives, or our lives as well. It's affecting my life, it's affecting everybody's life. So that part to me is critical of this film, how a scene or an art movement could emerge. And if we're, I don't know, always being fascinated by how the punk movement started and how the post-punk movement started. So I wish I was there and see it, because I only have the photos, the books, the documentary films from the era. So to be able to document that and be able to tell that story, I think that is a critical part of the film. This is a big question. Is the question out? I feel talking about legacy it might be a little bit pretentious from my perspective because I feel I'm right now in the weeds of still doing things and documenting things. Obviously, there's things that I can see in perspective that happened 10 years ago and I documented. But I feel to me the most important legacy about the work I'm doing is the legacy of documenting music itself. And to me, the most important part of music photography is music. Photography is just an afterthought. So the legacy is, to me, is how do you, the legacy to me is how do we document our stories and how do we tell our stories and how do I tell my personal story? And to me, this is just part of my personal story. I happen to be someone that is passionate about music, about art, and I've been just documented that side of my life. And the legacy of that is, to me, the best compliment of my photography is when someone tells me, oh, I discovered this band, thanks to your photos. To me, that's the most important compliment. Obviously, I love when someone tells me, oh, such a great photo, the light, the composition, all that stuff is, obviously, it's amazing, and I feel thankful, really thankful and honored by that. But when someone tells me, I discovered this band thanks to your photo, that to me, that's the purpose of my photography, is to tell stories about bands that I'm passionate about and you might not know. Or maybe you might listen to them, but now you're gonna be, oh, I wanna see them live because I wanna see what's happening there. So to me, that's the most important part, and that would be if there's any legacy, that's the legacy, is the music. I've been nominated for 4 times to the Abbey Music Photography Awards, so if I have any tips, is just go through a portfolio and give it some time. My most important tip is look for images that can tell a story, look for images that are compelling. Don't worry about images that are perfect. If the story is there, I think that's the most important part. And try to look from the perspective try to look at your images from the perspective of the audience. Look at your images from the perspective of a music fan, because I feel that's the purpose of the images that we take. So the images that we take are telling a story about music. So my tip is just look from that perspective. Look for those images that capture a unique moment in time. Doesn't matter if that moment could be in Madison Square Garden or in the living room of your house or someone's house. But if you feel that those images capture something unique and different and have a story to tell, maybe that's the image that you should submit. And if you don't get nominated, it's fine. If you get nominated, it's fine. And just continue, because I feel that's something that I see a lot in this universe. I've been doing music photography for a while, I would say 15 years or something. And I see waves of photographers. I see waves of people with a lot of energy and then they burned out. So I feel that it's important to do this because you love it and be consistent and just keep showing up. Maybe sometimes there's things happening in your life and you cannot go to shows every night, but then in the next year you may be able to go back to shows every night. You never know. But just be consistent, because if you go to 300 shows in 1 year and you feel that it's going nowhere, obviously you're gonna burn out. So, but if you feel that you're going to 300 shows that you love and you had a great time, whatever, you got some cool photos. And that's pretty much it. That's, if you got the cool photos and you went to good shows, the most important thing is you had a good time going to all the shows. And never forget that it's a privilege to be there. It's a privilege, especially in the bigger shows. We're in front of the audience. It's like, I don't know, there's no more VIP than that. You're in the first row, so don't take it for granted. Don't be rude. Don't be, because I feel people also sometimes they're like, there and oh yeah, no, you're there in the first row. You're in front of the biggest fan who's there here next to a barricade, and you're in front of that person. You have a unique position to tell that story, and enjoy the show and respect the show and feel privileged that you're in that position, because that's just a moment in time. You're not going to be there forever, and it's a privilege that we can capture those moments. It's a privilege that we are there in front of everybody, at least for 3 songs. Yes, we got 3 songs. Sometimes we get 1 song. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. That's not important. The important thing that we have the privilege to document these things. And someone made the decision that we could go to this one, and maybe we cannot go to the next one. And we didn't get that photo as I really wanted. Doesn't matter. Just continue, be consistent. That will be my tip.